For 2 weeks only, buy the Zombie Chronicles poster pack. A link is down below. In the beginning, there was only the Keepers. But then, the corruption of the Dark Aether leached its way onto the realm, and twisted the minds of some of the Keepers. These Keepers turned to shadows, and their former selves eventually became Apothicons. This was one of the early descriptions of kind of the creation of our zombies world. We found about this in Gorod Krovi from one of the Chronorium excerpts. However, this does not tell the full picture of what is going on in the greater scale of the zombies universe. So in the beginning there were the Keepers? Were they really the only one? Because we have some evidence to suggest that there was a second group, or potentially a group within the Keepers, kind of like a group of founding fathers to the zombies universe, shall I say, and these people might be far more powerful than any other group in the zombie storyline. What we may potentially have right now is a group that is incredibly powerful, which you've never heard of. Let me explain. Within Shadows of Evil, you could find this cipher, and when solved it reads, "The Elders will continue to seed space and time. I must lead them to a place they cannot see." This was the first ever mention of a group of people known as the Elders, and the Elders, you'd imagine, would go all the way back to the beginning. Well, in the beginning there was only the Keepers, which would then maybe suggest that there is another group within the Keepers that are incredibly powerful, and these were the ones who seeded space and time, potentially with the summoning key. And this would make sense when you consider that the summoning key seems to have been one of Monty's creations, since he has a schematic of it, and we have an image of him designing that schematic. So it could very well be that we have these group of people known as the Elders, and they had seeded space and time using devices such as the Chronorium, and Monty could be one of those people, considering he has a schematic of the summoning key, and he was seen making it in one of the loading screens. Now, what about other members of the Elders? Because we haven't really heard much about them at all. They were just thrown out there in that cipher, and then that was the end of it. There wasn't any mention of them. Well, some people have suggested that maybe Newton is actually an Elder, and I'm not talking about Sir Isaac Newton, but potentially a new character in the zombie storyline who we've never actually seen or heard from. We have found a reference to his name in Newton's cookbook, but that one is blatantly obvious, and most people probably don't even realize that that could potentially be another incredibly powerful character in the zombie storyline. So maybe we're in this situation where Monty and Newton are Elders, but are there any more? It seems as though there has to be, because there's a conversation between what appears to be some of the Elders in Shadows of Evil as well. So we have this cipher right here that when solved reads, "Although they have discovered the way, Primus will fail." This doesn't seem to be something that Monty would say, because Monty was somebody helping Primus, so it would have to be somebody outside of Primus, maybe two other Elders. And the reason we suggest that maybe these are Elders is because of this cipher right here that says, "M is interested in these worthless beings. All his work will be undone. X." Now maybe X is the signature or the initial of another Elder, but because it seems as though there's somebody who works with Monty and they're saying all of his work will be undone, they must be fairly close to Monty. And if Monty's an Elder, maybe this is a conversation between two other Elders, and potentially part of the conversation that began with, "Although they have discovered the way, Primus will fail." And this is where we get this idea that there has to be at least more than just Monty and Newton as Elders. Otherwise, who would Newton be having this conversation with, if Newton is even having this conversation? It could be two other Elders. So potentially we could have as many as 5, possibly more Elders. Now, I know I said 5 Elders, and where does that 5th Elder come from? If you think about it, X, Newton, Monty, another one, and then who else? Well, the Shadow Man. Monty has before in the past described the Shadow Man as one of his best friends. They were great colleagues, and we've also had this description of a worm being cut in half and becoming 2 separate parts, where if you cut a worm in half, both heads of the worm on both sides can continue to live. Where maybe Monty and the Shadow Man were potentially once one, and then maybe split into 2 and became best friends, and that's why they were able to get along so well. Your best friend could possibly be your own self. But once they split, they were both elders, and now we have a bunch of different elders where we can have the two elders having a conversation, plus Newton, plus Monty, plus the Shadow Man, plus however many other elders could potentially be in the story whom we've never heard from or heard of. I bring this up not because we have a stunning new bit of information or that it's particularly relevant to talk about the elders now, but I still think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. The elders appear to be powerful beings. Monty has proclaimed to have invented free will. He said it was his idea. Well, if it was his idea, then that means there were other people contributing ideas to the conversation, I guess, when they were seeding life and creating the universe and figuring out how the mechanics of life should work. If Monty had suggested free will, then other people had to have suggested other ideas. It couldn't have just been him. It wasn't a singular project. These are probably some of the most powerful beings in the zombie universe whom we've never heard of. I'd imagine that we will eventually explore this in the zombie storyline. Jason Blundell is creating an expansive zombies universe, one on a scale bigger than we had ever really anticipated when we started off back in World at War 8 years ago, and these elders may just be the fundamental building blocks of this entire universe. And I thought, for characters that seem to be so powerful and so mysterious, so few people know about them, and it wouldn't hurt to at least make a video discussing them and seeing what other people think of the elders. That's going to wrap things up for this video. It's a little bit shorter one. Unfortunately, there is no bombshell. There is no great thing to explain. I'm just putting the facts out there. We have some ciphers that appear to be conversations of them. We have a cipher describing the creation of the universe, and we have a cipher that explicitly mentions a group of people known as the Elders. And from what we understand from conversations from Monty in game, they may just be pretty freaking powerful. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm gonna go though. Have a wonderful day, and bye.